Nanocarbon alloy is the most expensive resource in Astroneer, and having to strive to get just one is a huge part of what makes Astroneer a fun and challenging game. As such, it would be an absolute shame if somebody went and made it dirt cheap. But yes, I did that. I made Nanocarbon alloy dirt cheap in Astroneer. Now, if you haven't seen my other dirt cheap videos, you may not know that this is literally the case. It's dirt cheap as in we are going to turn our soil into Nanocarbon alloy. Now, obviously, we're not going to get off scot-free on this one. With the other two dirt cheap videos, we were simply getting scrap and hydrazine from our soil, and those setups were very simple to create because those resources are far less expensive. However, turning soil into Nanocarbon alloy requires a great deal of processing, as we have to turn our soil into 5 different resources instead of just one. So yes, if you came onto this video thinking there was going to be a quick explanation as to how to do this, you were dead wrong, and you couldn't possibly be more wrong than you are wrong right now. And you're going to see, if you stick to the end of this video, that by the end of this video, I lost my will to live entirely, and that was exciting. So this is the setup, my friends, and I know it looks pretty advanced and confusing, but I can assure you it's just a combination of a bunch of simple automation steps that I will explain individually. All that is to say, this won't be hard to understand, but it may take me a while to explain it. Before we cover how this setup is built, however, I would like to explain a few things, starting with how we actually use this thing once it's complete. We'll be putting soil onto a platform with a centrifuge, and through a great deal of automatic processing, it'll be turned into Nanocarbon alloy. Now, this is really nice because it means all we have to do is worry about gathering soil without having to deal with any of the processing. The most impressive part of this, however, is that we'll be getting a single Nanocarbon alloy for just 6.5 soil canisters full of soil, making this beyond remarkably cheap. The next thing I would like to point out is that the gases we need for Nanocarbon alloy are going to be nitrogen, hydrogen, argon, and helium. The reason I point this out is because gases are the only resources in the game that we cannot get with soil no matter what we do. This doesn't matter, however, because as we all know, we can get gases for literally nothing. We simply must power an atmospheric condenser and turn it on. I ran out of breath while saying all that, and it really hurts. There is a slight issue, however, and that's that the only gases available on Silva, which is the planet we're going to be building this on, are nitrogen and hydrogen. This means we must go to Glacio to get the argon, and to Atrox to get the helium. As for nitrogen and hydrogen, though, they're simply built into the system because we can get them on the home planet. Now, this may seem like it's a genuine issue, but it isn't, and I really mean that, because you can set up incredibly cheap bases on these planets to gather these gases automatically while you're away, because, if you didn't know, the atmospheric condenser indeed works no matter how far outside a render distance you are. I ran out of breath again because I keep making these lines so long. But yes, I would like to further address just how much of an issue this happens not to be, because if you get an entire one of these full for both argon and helium, you will have enough of both of those to get 160 Nanocarbon alloy, so all you'll have to do is get soil. So as you can see, this really isn't an issue because yes, you do have to go get these gases separately, but it's so infrequent and so easy to do that it just doesn't count. Now, there is one more thing I would like to mention before I show how the automation system back here works, but I swear I'll make this quick. Before I show this elaborate contraption, I feel like it's important that you understand how it's even possible for soil to become Nanocarbon alloy in the first place. So what you're seeing on screen now is the cost of Nanocarbon alloy in terms of normal natural resources we can gather. Now, we already covered gases, so we can ignore those, but the rest of these you may notice all have one thing in common. They all can be gotten with the trade platform. So basically, if we turn our soil into scrap, we can get everything we need for Nanocarbon alloy. And we can, which is what makes this possible. We turn our soil into scrap, and use that scrap to get what we need to craft a Nanocarbon alloy. First things first, we need a way to turn our soil into scrap automatically, as previously mentioned. Now, this is actually a pretty simple process, as I'm about to demonstrate right now, because all we need is a platform to be able to put medium soil canisters on, and then for a soil centrifuge to take the soil from that soil canister to make it into resin automatically. The reason we are making resin automatically, as you can see here, is because the resin gets taken from the soil centrifuge once it's made and turned into canisters automatically, and then those canisters are scrapped, therefore we are turning our soil into scrap. So as you can see, this is very simple. All we're doing is turning our soil into a resource that can be crafted into something that can be scrapped, so that we can scrap it. Now that we have scrap, though, things get freaky because we have to share that scrap between 5 different trade platforms. The reason we must do this is because each trade platform must be dedicated to a single resource, and we need 5 different resources to make nanocarbon alloy. The way we're going to divide the scrap between these trade platforms, though, obviously, is going to be with auto arms. Now, as you can see, things start off pretty dang basic. We just get a scrap from the large shredder, and we put them on a large platform A. The thing is, though, we're only going to be getting a single scrap at a time from the large shredder. That means we can't just bring the scrap over here and have 5 auto arms try to take it at the same time, because that means we would be expecting them to share the scrap evenly between each other, when that's not actually how auto arms work. The thing is, one auto arm would just take all that scrap for itself probably, and then the other 4 auto arms wouldn't have any, which means the other 4 trade platforms wouldn't have any. So how do we prevent one auto arm from taking all the scrap for itself? Well, as I mentioned before, we have a large platform A here, and a large platform A has 4 storage slots, meaning it's going to hold 4 scrap. And since there's 4 scrap, we will have 4 auto arms that will take that scrap whenever the platform gets full. And as you can see, that is the strategy. If we wait for the platform to get full to turn on the auto arms, then they will each only have enough time to get one, meaning that none of them will be able to steal from each other. Now, the way we're going to do that, obviously, is with a storage sensor. If we set it to full or empty, then that means whenever this platform fills up, they will each grab one, and since they're each grabbing one, that will empty the platform, and then they'll turn off and wait for that to happen again. I really hope that made sense because I tried my very best to explain that. Now, you may have noticed that we're actually only splitting the scrap to go in 4 different directions here, even though we needed to go to 5 trade platforms, which, you know, obviously that would be an issue. But no, not at all, actually. That is not an issue, and that's because we're going to be splitting one of these 4 paths into 2 other paths, and so that's going to equal 5 paths overall, meaning we can go to 5 different trade platforms. Now, obviously, the way we split this 4th path into 2 different paths is the same way we split the original into 4 different paths, and that's going to be by using a storage sensor, but this time we're only using a platform that has 2 storage and only 2 auto arms because, you know, we're only doing 2 paths instead of 4. But this all kind of begs the question, why didn't we just split this into 5 different paths at the very start instead of splitting it into a 4th path and then splitting that path into 2? Well, let's take a look at what the first split did. It made it so that each of 4 different paths would get 25% of all scrap that comes in. So these 3 trade platforms are getting 25% of all scrap we generate from our soil. But this 4th path leads to not just 1 trade platform, but 2, meaning that each of them will only be getting 12.5% of all scrap generated. Now, if we simply split the scrap 5 ways at the start, every single trade platform would be getting an equal 20% of all scrap that comes in. But we don't want that. This is due to what resources are being obtained by each trade platform. From left to right, these trade platforms are gathering iron, titanium, ammonium, graphite, and organic. So as you can see, the 2 that are getting less scrap are gathering much cheaper resources, meaning they don't need as much scrap. But now it's time to discuss trade platforms and why we hate them. The reason we hate them is because we can't use storage sensors with them. I mean, this storage sensor here is acting like it's working. It's going to let me switch modes and stuff, but I can assure you it will not do a thing if this thing receives scrap. It does not work with the trade platform. And the reason this is a problem is obviously because of that. We cannot tell when this thing has received scrap to tell it to leave, so we have to come up with our own way to know whether or not the trade platform has received scrap or not. And the best way I've come up with to do that is going to be by using timing shenanigans. And so what we're going to do is come back to our first storage sensor, and we're going to deconnect it to all the auto arms here, and we're going to run it through a delay repeater first. And so basically what that means is we're going to stack a delay repeater on top of this, and then we're going to put it at full, and then we're going to do with the delay repeater exactly what we did with the storage sensor originally and attach it to these 4 auto arms. However, we're also going to run that delay repeater additionally to another delay repeater, and we're going to hook that delay repeater up to, actually we're going to put it on full as well, but we're going to hook that delay repeater up to these 2 trade platforms right here, just like this. And so basically this first delay repeater here actually didn't do anything for trade platforms at all. All it did was say, once these auto arms turn on, they're going to stay on for just long enough to actually put scrap on the trade platforms before they turn off again. And then obviously this delay repeater over here tells the... Obviously, this delay repeater over here tells the trade platforms not to take off until they've had enough time to receive the scrap, which is why, actually, I forgot we're going to be running this one also to this 3rd trade platform. Forgive me for being an absolute fool in front of everyone. Hopefully you can forgive me. But yes, the reason we didn't we only attached that to those 3, obviously, is because these 2 over here split from this 4th path. So basically we're going to be doing the same thing to this storage sensor that we did to this one over here. And so even though all of what I just now explained about all these these delay repeaters might seem confusing, it's actually not confusing because once you look at it, you realize that all we're doing here is giving these auto arms enough time to put scrap on the trade platforms, and then giving the trade platforms enough time to receive said scrap before they take off. Now, if the way I explained that seemed a little confusing and this is kind of frightening to you now, do not worry because that is honestly the most confusing part of this video, and the rest of it should be pretty straightforward. Hopefully, but also yes, we hate trade platforms again, because there's another issue with trade platforms that we're about to discuss. You see, even though we tweak the distribution of scrap a little, some resources will still come in faster than others. For example, we'll be getting iron far less often than organic, because even though iron gets twice as much scrap, it's more than twice as expensive, meaning it doesn't receive enough scrap to keep up with organic's cheapness. Now we just need one of each item to make a nanocarbon alloy, except for ammonium, of which we need two. This means that the cheaper resources in this system are going to be produced faster, even though they are used at the same rate. Because of this, we need a way to make it so that each individual assembly line deactivates when its item becomes more abundant than the system can handle. So in a normal situation, you would expect an auto arm to take the items off of the trade platforms and continue them on for processing just like this. However, if we're doing that with cheaper items like organic, what's going to happen is we are going to be getting more organic than everything else, and so eventually, the organic assembly line here will get completely full, and the auto arm will no longer be able to take organic off of the trade platform. Now, normally this wouldn't be an issue because the trade platform could just act as storage until this auto arm can take stuff off of it again. But the trade platform can still receive scrap even if it has organic on it still, and if it receives scrap even with the organic on it, it will blast off, which means it will simply drop all the organic on the ground, and you know, that's not going to work with us. So basically, we need a way to tell the trade platform you're not going anywhere as long as an assembly line is backed up, which is definitely something we need for organic, but I recommend that you implement this, as you can see back here, on every single one of these just in case, so that if any assembly line gets full, the trade platforms for those assembly lines will stay put. And so yes, this indeed is the contraption, and it may look pretty dang confusing, but I can assure you it's not. What both of these auto arms are doing is exactly what we talked about before. They're simply taking from the trade platform and putting the stuff on the rest of the assembly line so it can be processed. However, there's an additional middle platform here, and what that says is that once the rest of the assembly line here gets full, this first auto arm places items onto it, filling it up. And then the second auto arm is able to take those items off whenever the rest of the assembly line is empty again. Which is where the storage sensor comes in. Whenever this gets full, we can know to deactivate the trade platform because we don't have room for anything else. And so that's exactly what we are going to do. We're going to take this storage sensor and run it to a switch that turns off the auto arm just before the trade platform so it can't receive scrap, because if it can't receive scrap, then it can't blast off. But yes, this first auto arm fills up this platform when the assembly line is full, which tells this storage sensor to turn off this auto arm, cutting off scrap to the trade platform. But obviously, likewise, this second auto arm empties this whenever the assembly line is no longer full, and it tells this to turn the auto arm back on so that the trade platform can receive scrap again. I hope that makes sense. Please tell me that made sense, because I did a lot of takes on this one. My throat's getting sore. So now the hard part is over, my children. I have explained the big scary parts of this process, and now all I have to do is explain what we do for each resource. So I have broken down the crafting of nanocarbon alloy into 4 levels, and for the first level, we need hydrazine. And so the first item we're going to be discussing is obviously going to be ammonium, because that's what we need for hydrazine. And what we're going to do is run that ammonium straight from the trade platform to a chemistry lab that is set to automatically craft hydrazine, but we also need hydrogen, as you can see here, which means since we're on the home planet, all we have to do is add a atmospheric condenser and automatically set it to make hydrogen, and then auto arm that over to the chemistry lab whenever it's available. For our second level of nanocarbon alloy crafting, we're going to need graphene, which means we're going to be talking about graphite next, and all we gotta do is run our graphite straight from the trade platform over to a chemistry lab that is automatically set to craft graphene. Now you'll notice, we don't just need graphite to craft graphene, we also need hydrazine, but we made hydrazine in the last step. So all we do is run the hydrazine straight from its chemistry lab that's right next door over to the graphene chemistry lab so that it can just receive that with the graphite and make graphene automatically, no problem at all. For our third level of nanocarbon alloy crafting, we are going to need titanium alloy and steel. We're going to need both of those in the same step. I'm not going to explain why those are in the same level of crafting, but there is a logic behind it. Anyways, I'm need to focus here. We're going to start off with the titanium alloy, and we're going to show the steel off right after. So obviously for titanium alloy, the main resource is titanium, so that's what we're discussing next. Straight from the titanium trade platform, we're going to run to a smelter because you don't get it smelted, you have to smelt it yourself. And then from this smelter, we are going to run that titanium across here. Now this is a little disgusting looking, but it is kind of rough when you're crossing all these lines. Basically just place a diagonal auto arm here to take the titanium off the smelter all the way over to a chemistry lab here that is automatically set to craft titanium alloy. Now, for titanium alloy, we also need graphene, but as you can see, we decided to place the chemistry lab for this straight in front of the graphene chemistry lab, so all we gotta do is just take the graphene over with this here auto arm, and we will have the graphene and this titanium just like that. But I'm stuttering right now, but I'm not going to redo the cut because my voice, my throat's getting sore. It's getting a little wild here, guys. It's kind of a race to the end of the video here at this point, but yeah. Yes, we're getting our graphene and our titanium over here to this chemistry lab at the same time. But oh no, we need nitrogen too. But just like with hydrogen, that can be gotten right here on the home planet. So put an atmospheric condenser here in front of the titanium alloy chemistry lab. Have an auto arm automatically take it from the atmospheric condenser to the titanium alloy chemistry lab. And it'll automatically craft up just like that. And that's the scariest alloy, by the way, of all of them. Other than nanocarbon alloy, titanium alloy is the scariest. So the fact that it's in nanocarbon alloy says a lot about nanocarbon alloy, but I'm just saying that so you know that steel is not as scary. I'm just covering it second anyways. But yes, we also need steel, and that brings us over to this here organic line. What we're going to be doing is taking our organic straight from the trade platform to a smelter, which turns it into carbon. The carbon that gets put into a chemistry lab that automatically crafts steel, and as you can see, carbon is one of the resources we need for this. But oh no, we also need iron, and that's kind of spooky, because iron is on the entirely opposite side of this contraption, so we have to run it all the way from here to this chemistry lab right here without causing any shenanigans with the other lines. Now really, that's not that hard, and I'm not really going to cover that here because it's just not that hard. It just sounds like it's hard because you're crossing 3 of these lines, but really, that's not likely to cause you any problems. I mean, you can see what I did right here. I have the iron coming off this to an auto arm to a platform that's hidden inside of this that gets taken off of by another auto arm that eventually makes it to the steel chemistry lab. And so now we have iron and carbon, but oh no, we also need argon for steel. And as I previously mentioned, as I previously mentioned, we cannot get those on the home planet, and so we're going to be getting those on the other planets and bringing them back in these medium gas canisters. Now this is argon, and this one's helium. We're putting them both on the same platform in a single medium gas canister as the storage for this contraption. We will always have them both on enable output so that auto arms can take from them just like this. So this is the argon one. It's taking straight from our argon storage and putting it on to the steel crafting chemistry lab so that we can get steel after the iron and carbon are there from the argon. The way I worded that's kind of weird, but you know exactly what's going on because it's kind of obvious. We have argon here, it gets taken over to the steel thing. Now we can have steel because we have everything else we need. And that brings us to the fourth and final level of nanocarbon alloy crafting, which is good because I can taste blood in my throat from all this speaking I've done today. Retakes and retakes. My throat hurts. If you haven't subscribed by this point, well, yeah, go ahead and do that. All right, anyways, no. The last step is really simple. All we're doing is taking the steel we crafted in the last step and the titanium alloy we crafted in the last step. So this chemistry lab and this chemistry lab, we're running the resources from them into a new chemistry lab that makes nanocarbon alloy itself. And oh no, we also need helium. But just like with argon, we're running it from an auto arm off this platform, except we're going this way instead for the helium because we're going to this chemistry lab instead. And it crafts nanocarbon alloy. But obviously, we need somewhere to store this stuff. So where are we gonna put it? Well, we're just gonna put it in a large resource canister unless you have other preferences. I don't. So I'm putting it in a large resource canister so that auto arm just takes the nanocarbon alloy over here to this large resource canister. And things are as simple as that. That's the whole process, guys. I really hope you enjoyed that. I didn't. At least not near the last. I'm kind of hurting right now. It hurts. But yes, my friends, that is indeed the entire setup. And after you create this thing, you will get a crap ton because of a scrap ton of scrap. I don't know. You're going to get you're going to make scrap, and that scrap's going to become nanocarbon alloy, which is pretty wild, if you ask me. Yeah, like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Join my Discord. Link in the description. To become a jerk today. Goodbye.